Alrighty guys, let's jump into more of your asks. I thought about that trading card AMC released about Beth being buried at the church. Obviously, it's cheap and lazy to just throw that in there, but when Morgan goes to the church in the coda in 508, the walkers had been cleared out. So TF must have gone back, right? I guess we're supposed to believe that Beth got buried there even with no evidence. No, I actually, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think that's what they are going for at all. I don't think that was the church they buried her at. And I think if you go back and watch 508, you know, the part where that has to do with the church and the walkers, remember that the walkers were breaking out of the church. So Michonne and Carl and Judith and Gabriel, they got out and they like pinned the door shut and pinned the walkers in. But then they got to a point where they weren't sure exactly what they were going to do because the walkers were going to break out and they didn't really have anywhere else to go. Yeah, they could just run through the woods to get away, but they've got baby Judith and they know that Rick is coming back to that spot for them. So they were just standing around trying to figure out what they wanted to do. But then the walkers started to break out, like they were busting down the door. And then Abraham, driving the fire truck, came up and parked it in front of the door. So the walkers couldn't get out. And then, obviously, Michonne tells Maggie that they figured out that Beth was in Atlanta and they went to get her. And then they obviously all just get on the fire truck and head into Atlanta. And then we see them arrive at the hospital just as Daryl is carrying Beth out, right? But the point is, the walkers were breaking out of the church. So we didn't see it. But as soon as Abraham pulled the truck away from the church door, the walkers all got out. So when Morgan goes back and it's empty, that's why. I mean, it's a mess, right? Because the walkers got in and totally overran the place, and so it's a catastrophe, but then they broke out. So I don't think that was Team Family's doing at all. I think the walkers got out and just started walking and found out, and now they're out in the woods somewhere, you know, but the church is empty now. So I really don't think that that's where they went to bury her. I think they found some other church that was intact, and that's where they tried to bury her, and that's where everything went down. And then there's the fact that we do have those filming spoilers from season 5 where Emily posted, and it was pretty obvious she was filming. And, you know, at the time, nobody thought much of it because nobody knew that coda was going to happen yet. That was just when she was filming, and everyone else was filming for season 5. And, it, you know, the filming happened behind a wall, so nobody could see what was going on, but we could see the church spire above the wall, the white church spire. That's where they filmed whatever happened, you know, at the church. And that was a different church than Gabriel's church. Okay. So, anyway, it's we don't know for sure, I guess, but I can't imagine them going back to the same church because it wouldn't make logical sense in the show because Michonne and everybody would have said his church got overrun. Like, oh, let's go back to the church that was overrun and busted through and 1 million walkers and try to bury her there. Like, why would they do that? You know what I mean? They would just find some other place. So I'm assuming that they got in the cars and they started driving. And then when they found something that looked like a nice church they could have a funeral near or something, a place to bury her, they pulled off and tried to do that, but that's when everything happened and a big horde came through and they put her in a car and had to run away and all of the stuff we think went down that we didn't see. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. You know, the trading card thing is interesting because I've had people that have been kind of upset about it and feel like when they put that out, they were trying to rewrite what happened in season 5. And I've never been that, pessimistic about it, I guess. When I saw that, I was super excited because I was like, no, they're telling us something here. They are giving us hints. And I would never see that as something where they're just trying to rewrite it because they're douchebags or something. You know what I mean? Like, that's how a lot of people reacted to that. And that's not what I thought at all. I was going, no, they're dropping hints about something we haven't seen. So to me, that completely validates Team Delusional because clearly there is stuff that happened that we have not seen. And we know that they filmed some of it. And I maintain, if they have not shown it to us, then they still plan to show it to us. What I mean is, if it had been cut, like, oh, we're just not going that way anymore, it would be a DVD extra. You know what I mean? Like, they would have shown it to us. They've done that with other scenes. But they haven't shown us that, which means it's still in play to be part of the show at some future point. So yeah, and just that trading card completely confirms everything we've ever said. So once again, unless Gimple comes out and says, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. Sorry about that. I will continue to have faith that she's going to return, because I don't even know that it's fair to say that it's faith. There's a lot of evidence for it. You know, there's no reason to hold this back if they're not going to use it. There's no reason for them not to show us her funeral if they filmed it, and, you know, whether they're going to use it or not, which just tells me that they are going to show it to us. They just haven't gotten there yet. So anyway, hopefully that helps. Is season 4 even happening? They haven't filmed anything yet or announced that it got greenlit. I don't know how much longer they can milk this sterile cow if nothing big happens. I kind of already answered this yesterday. Season 4 is happening, and there's some conjecture that they're already filming. Not that, you know, obviously because people know they haven't announced it, but people are wondering if they're going to be kind of filming the two congruently. So we'll just have to wait and see, and I'm sure they'll give us an update sooner or later. So here's another one that says that season 3 is still filming. I thought they had already wrapped. Nobody really knows. Like, people are thinking that they might have wrapped season 3 and started 4, but I mean, you're right that they haven't told us, so it's all just conjecture. We'd have to wait for them to give us an update. Did we ever find out who that blonde person was with the lock of hair writing down coordinates? Did they want us to think it was Troy, but they didn't seem to care that there was a lock of blonde hair in the shot? No, I mean, this is another example, just like they did, and this is why this is so compelling to me. I think I talked about this in the last video. They really tried hard in 509 to pass off Tyrese's funeral as Beth's, right? And I don't get it as much anymore, but for several years after that, I would have people who would, you know, just message me through social media or comment on one of my posts and would say, no, she did get a funeral. What are you talking about? It was at the beginning of 509. And I would say, no, that was Tyrese's funeral. No, it wasn't. It was Beth's. And I would just say, look, go back and watch the episode again. Look at the funeral at the beginning and then look at it at the end. It's the same funeral. And then they would come back a few days later and go, oh, you're right. I didn't realize that. You know what I mean? So it was like a bait and switch. You know, they were trying to make people believe that was Beth's funeral as a way of, it's just part of the deception about her having died, right? And they never actually say that it was her funeral. They just made it that way so that people would, you know, infer that on their own. But then they also have plausible deniability, because probably what's going to happen is, you know, when she's revealed, people will say, yeah, but she got a funeral. You buried her in 509. And then the powers that be can come out and go, no, 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 we never said that. That was her funeral. If you look, you can see that it's Tyrese's funeral. We don't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, they will be able to deny it because it wasn't Beth's funeral. It was Tyrese's. But they purposely set it up that way to trick people. And that's what I feel like they're doing with this blonde from Fear the Walking Dead as well. Because for all intents and purposes, they've pretty much said, or said without saying, that it was Troy. Because Troy's the one who showed up after that and ostensibly heard Madison's voice on the radio and came to find her. Now, that doesn't mean that something about that blonde and that storyline wasn't linked to Troy. Maybe somebody else took down the coordinates and gave them to him. And I'm not even 100% sure that it actually is Beth. Like, it very well could be. But what if it's just another blonde who gave him the coordinates, and then later they'll say, oh yeah, it was this lady who did that. I mean, I only say that in the sense that, is Emily actually part of that story, or is Beth actually part of that story? I don't know. But even if it's not, let's say that it's not her and it's just some other blonde lady that they will later say, oh yeah, well, she's the one who gave the coordinates to Troy and told him to go here. Okay, but there's still some reason they showed us a blonde woman with that blonde curl of hair in that scene, okay? Because it's symbolic of something else, some other blonde that's out there somewhere, and they're hinting at it, okay? And once again, guys, who were they hinting at? Isabel? Like, why would they do that? We didn't even know who she was yet. And she only lasted 2 seasons and died. Like, there would be no reason for them to hint at Isabel. What other blonde could they possibly be hinting at? Why do that? For no reason, just for the hell of it. You know what I mean? They wouldn't do that. Gimple and Angela Kang, they are too meticulous in the way they plan and the way they do symbolism. So, obviously, that wasn't Troy. And, you know, I've made this joke plenty of times. I half expected him to show up with long blonde hair and then, like, 5 minutes later cut it so he looked normal again, just so that they could explain that away. But they didn't even bother to do that. You know what I mean? Like, it clearly was not him. It was a woman's hands, very thin fingers. The blonde hair, he didn't have blonde hair anywhere. There was no hint of that on him anywhere. So this was a purposeful choice This wasn't just like they accidentally had someone stand in and her hair got on shot. No, this was something they chose to do. They said, for this scene, we are going to put a blonde woman into the scene writing down the coordinates. Why would they do that? There's no reason, especially concerning fear and that storyline, that they needed to do that. Like, no reason at all. So there's got to be a different reason. And the only thing I can think of is that they're hinting at some other blonde who's out there and telling us, by not showing her face, that there's still somebody out there that needs to be revealed. Who is blonde and a female. Okay, so no, we have not found out who it was. There's not been any confirmation on it, but it's pretty ludicrous to think that that could have been Troy, or that people would even believe that was Troy. I mean, I don't think too many people have thought on it too much, not like we have, but anyone who sees that is not going to go, oh, that's Troy. They're going to go, what the heck? Why did they do that? You know, but I don't think people think about it beyond that. They're just like, okay, that was weird, you know, and that's all. But we're picking up on it. And, you know, WDUA would say that they purposely put these hints in for us, for TD, because we're the only ones picking up on them. So their message is for us. And this thing with Troy, I mean, it was a season or two ago now, but it was not that long ago. It was not nearly as long ago as season 5, and they're still dropping these hints. So that should give you guys hope, okay? Hey, hope you've had a nice holiday season. You've been missed. Oh, thank you. I hope you all had a nice holiday season too. And I did have one, so thank you. It always irritates me when people say they miss the season 5 group the most, and that group almost always excludes Beth because she was just an afterthought. Because she was absent and then died, people never seem to remember her as part of the group. What was the point of having her alone in a hospital to be abused just for her to die in the end? No, I agree. I mean, we can't really do anything about how people remember everything. And I think a lot of the reason that they say that is because we had so many great characters still in season 5. That was before Abraham died. It was before Glenn died. Sasha and Tyrese were both still there. And I really loved all of those characters, you know. So I think people are mostly being nostalgic for when we had a lot of really great characters who then afterward had a lot of really horrific and tragic deaths. And so that just makes them remember season 5 nostalgically, you know, and there's not a whole lot we can do about them not seeing Beth as part of that group. And I mean, in a way, it might almost be psychological because she wasn't part of the main group for season 5. You know, she was off on her own, so maybe they kind of can't help but remember it that way. I don't know. And I understand your frustration. Yeah, that is frustrating, but, you know, maybe give them a little bit of leeway on that. But you're right that if they didn't have any other point to putting her in Grady except to have her be there and be abused and die, there would be no point. It would be a completely throwaway storyline. And even though there's a lot of people on the internet who just don't take into account the money of it all, Grady was an expensive storyline to do, okay? They had to, with most of the rest of the group being together, and yeah, I mean, they did get separated. Daryl and Carol took off one way, and you have Maggie and Abraham and Glenn going another way. So they weren't all together in the exact same set all the time, but most of the others were traveling in cars and things, and they could have just filmed all of that in the AMC lot, and it wouldn't have been a big deal, but they had to actually go to an abandoned hospital. They had to rent that hospital. They had to pay all these extra actors who were in the hospital. I mean, it was a completely separate storyline, and that takes a lot of money to do. And I'm not saying that they don't have the money. Obviously, AMC has plenty of money, but they wouldn't do that for a throwaway storyline. I mean, at least not... No, they really wouldn't. Maybe they would do something like that at the very end of the series for either Daryl or Rick, but they wouldn't do that for anybody else, you know? And that would also be because it's ending, which clearly TWD did not end in season 5. So nothing about it makes sense. So yeah, you're right. There has to have been more of a point. And that's why it always kind of irritates me too when people say, well, they filmed those extra scenes, but they got cut. You know, lots of scenes get cut. And the thing is, not only is that not logical because of all the money they've spent, as I've already said, but even the scenes that have been cut that we have seen as DVD extras, they're so small. Like, that's what I always notice. We don't see a whole lot of cut scenes. I mean, yeah, you can like shave down scenes, so just the last second or two or a couple of lines of dialogue are gone, and those we probably wouldn't see anyway because they're not full scenes. But when it comes to full scenes that might be DVD extras, they're not big scenes. You know, we had the scene, both of them I'm thinking of from season 5 that have been circulated a lot on the internet are when Beth went to see Percy after he got knocked down because he was hurt. And then there's the one of Rick and Daryl talking on the roof where he says, you know, if something goes wrong, we just kill everybody. But those were like 30-second scenes. You know what I mean? And we're talking about days and days and days of filming and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment and people you had to pay and extras and effects and time. And you guys, that sort of thing does not just get thrown away. I'm telling you, it does not get thrown away. And AMC is they're too good at what they do. You know what I mean? They're too good about their budget and they're too good about planning so that they really stay on budget and on schedule. And we know that because we've even seen them talk about how they had to cut corners here or do this there because it wasn't working the way that they had planned. And that doesn't happen very often. So it's the exception, not the rule. And because they had to stay on schedule, it kind of didn't end up looking the way they wanted it to. But then they come out and explain that and be like, guys, we only had this amount of time or this amount of money or this many takes. And so we had to do it this way. And we understand that it's not the best work, but, you know, there it is. That's what we had to work with. So to say that they filmed for days and days and spent tens of thousands of dollars and then went, no, we're just not going to use that. I mean, guys, that's just not a thing. That's not even an opinion. That's just not the way it works. So for people to say that they just did the hospital storyline to kill off Beth, or that the stuff that was filmed during those missing 17 days just got thrown away, it just goes to show how little people know about business. And it's just their ignorance coming out. So just understand that. Thank you, though, for the ask. I'm a little confused about the CRM now. I think it would be cool if Beth turned out to be in the CRM, but didn't Michonne and Rick wipe the whole thing out at the end of The Ones Who Live? Now there's no more big bad to fight, right? I always thought it would make sense to bring Beth back if she was the key to fighting a big bad like the CRM, but do they even exist anymore? So at this point, everyone's a little bit confused about the CRM, and we don't know if they're going to end up being the big bad or not. It doesn't seem like it right now, but I do think that could turn. So to answer your question, they did not wipe them out. The CRM is definitely still there. They're still an organization. It's more like Rick and Michonne made peace with them, and now they'll kind of, I don't even know if work together is the right thing, but the CRM like dropped Rick and Michonne off back at Alexandria, or at the Commonwealth, actually, I think. So the CRM now knows they're there, and they know the CRM, and, you know, obviously Rick spent a lot of time inside the CRM, so it's almost more like they're buddies now. So that definitely seems like they're not the big baddie that everyone's going to fight, so I understand, and that kind of surprised a lot of us. We didn't think that was the way it was going to go, but two things to keep in mind. One, it could be that we were just mistaken about the CRM and they're not the big baddie, and there's going to be some other big baddie, maybe somebody overseas that Daryl's going to come into contact with, who will be the big war. Okay, maybe they will end up pairing with the CRM against somebody else. Like, it could be, we don't know. But the other thing is that the CRM is a massive, massive organization, and Rick's clearly not leading it. Somebody else is. So even though they killed off... okay, I'm blanking on his name, Terry O'Quinn's character, who was like the general over it. Even though they killed him off, somebody else has to take the reins now. And it kind of made it seem like they had killed off all the possibilities because we also killed off Jadis. But that doesn't mean that somebody else isn't going to come in and, you know, be kind of a douchebag leader and could still be a threat to Alexandria. We just don't know which way it's going to go. But because they made it such a big organization, I mean, the thing is like Rome or something. It's huge. And so they could have somebody else take over that starts to threaten people, or they could break it into pieces or factions and have them, you know, war with different factions. I mean, there's literally 100 ways they could go. So I don't think it means that the war is off or that the storyline is ending in that regard. I just think we don't know exactly what it's going to look like moving forward. But there are so many possibilities that, you know, I mean, take your pick. And it just depends on what way they want to go with it. We did hear a rumor that Andrew Lincoln might be joining one of the spinoffs. And again, this is just a rumor. Take it with a grain of salt. I have no idea if it will turn out to be true. But there was conjecture that he was going to be joining Dead City. Now, that actually makes a certain amount of sense to me. That actually rings true to me, because this is something that I've said for a long time, but I haven't talked about it in a while. During All Out War, it was very much Rick pitted against Negan, right? That's just how All Out War was. And even back then, I felt like it was a foreshadowing of a bigger story that would be Rick against Negan. So even when All Out War ended, and it ended much like the comic book, and I think that's because they were forcing Gimple to adhere, at least loosely, to the comic book storyline. And so we had something very similar where he didn't kill Negan at the end, Negan survived, but obviously Rick won, and, you know, Team Family won and all of that. Even then, I felt like there was going to be a bigger conflict having to do with Rick and Negan. And I didn't know what it would be, and I wasn't even sure that was a thing. I mean, obviously, I don't pay attention to that much stuff nearly as much as Beth and Daryl stuff, but that's just the way I felt about it. And there was a lot of talk during All Out War about tomorrow, and tomorrow is always about the bigger war that's coming tomorrow, coming in the future. Anyway, so then after Dead City Season 1, I mean, Negan sort of became King of New York in a way, and then I went, oh, so maybe it's going to be Negan in New York versus Rick leading the CRM, and that's going to be this massive, massive conflict, and they'll be on either side again. That would make sense. Well, as we've already said and established, the CRM thing didn't go the way we thought, at least not yet. But the fact that they set up Rick and Negan in that way during All Out War, it would make sense to me if Rick joined Dead City. And will it be him and Negan against some other big bad guy? Or will it be Rick and Negan on either side of a battle? I don't know. Either one would be super interesting. But everyone, I think, was kind of wondering where they were going with Dead City. Because, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, Negan and Maggie's a really interesting dynamic. But I also don't, well, I guess in the first season they did have an objective, which was that Herschel Jr. was kidnapped. So they did have an objective, but overall it was kind of like, okay, well, but other than getting Herschel back, where is the spinoff going? And they got him back at the end of season 1. So, you know, it could have just been a one-off single season just to do something fun with Negan and Maggie, and then they got Herschel back at the end, and end of story, right? Except that it's not. They're going on to season 2. So they have to have some sort of end game in mind for that spinoff. And I don't know what it will be. But it would make sense to me if Rick joined that spinoff. So anyway, there's just a lot of possibilities, and I think it'll be really interesting to see where it goes. I think it would be really fun to have Rick and Negan back interacting again and in a show together again. I think that would be fun. Definitely something I would watch. But I obviously can't give you a definitive answer on the CRM because we just don't know. So sorry about that, but it's something we'll just have to keep an eye on moving forward. All right, guys, I'm over time, so I'm going to call it there for today, and I will be back soon. Have a good week.